Hey guys, welcome back to the Bro and a Pro podcast where we hope to help you reach your full potential, whether that be inside or outside the gym. I'm your main host, self-proclaimed gym bro, and I'm joined today by Australia's #1 comp prep team, head coach Tim McKinnon from Team One Percenters.
Hey bro, how you doing?
Thank you again for doing this podcast with me. This is the second time that you're on the podcast.
Yeah, I got more hair this time.
Yes.
So yeah.
So what changed since last time to now? So the hair.
Well, yeah, pretty much just hair. But like honestly, man, I don't know, like we spoke like pretty much this time last year, was it? Almost.
I think it might have been, yeah, it
Yeah.
might have been this time last year, yeah.
I feel like I've aged maybe 10 years in every year. Like I have like an exponential aging, or not necessarily aging, but like self-development type thing. Like I always feel like I kind of just have like 50 lives in 1 month. You know what I mean? I just kind of go through like, you know how you have like an emotional life cycle where you kind of like up and then down? That happens like every week, you know? So like I kind of
Wow.
feel like I'm progressing as a person really quick. So it's hard to know like how to quantify the change other than just I'm different, you know? It's kind of
Yeah.
weird like, but
So
in terms
how do you manage that? So obviously you mentioned that emotional roller coaster. Is that due to like clients? Is that due to business maybe? Like, or just life
yeah,
itself?
I think if you're trying to do anything like above average, there's a massive resistance to that, whether it's your own personal like beliefs in yourself or whether it's external pressure or maybe there's just simply like a business thing that you have to get around and make a deal or financial stress, whatever it is. There's always something that's going to prevent you from doing something extraordinary. And I think that I especially always seem to like almost underappreciate what those could be and kind of think, oh, this is going to be easy, you know, and then I get sort of to the hard part, and I'm like, this isn't easy. This was definitely not easy. And then you have that decision where you're like, okay, I can stop or I can really push harder.
Mhm.
And I tend to be good at doing that, but I tend to also need to learn that things aren't always going to be easy. So it's like it's establishing that sort of life cycle with yourself and it builds confidence, put it that way. I think that's what it is. It's just when you're trying to do anything of worth doing, it's far more difficult than you first expect. But that's the experience that you set out to gain. And then as a result of that experience, you kind of accelerate yourself forwards. As long as you keep going, I think that's the trick is like just keep falling forwards and hoping you stand, you know?
That's a great metaphor. I love that. And I think,
Yeah.
one thing, especially like with business, is like you've got this crazy good idea, you're excited about it, you're like, oh my God, this is such the next best thing. And then you
Yeah.
don't realize the amount of work that goes into it. Then also the doubt of like, shit, what if this doesn't work?
Dude. Yeah. And
Yeah.
and especially in an industry where you rely on people. You know, it's suddenly, I mean, one of the reasons why I got into bodybuilding in the first place was because I didn't have to rely on anyone. Um, and like when you first sort of establish that, yeah, this is good. I found something that I can do and nothing, it's all up to me. And then you kind of realize that even if you want to do something great with bodybuilding, you still have to have a team. You still have to have a coach. You still have to have support. You still have to have a good relationship, whatever. So it's never ever independent. And I think that assuming that you can do great things on your own is like probably the most naive thing about being an adult. You know what I mean? It's like you just can't. You just can't. It doesn't matter where you go. You're always going to have people to lean on. And I think realizing that, especially in business, is like probably the biggest game changer. Like you just need people around you, and you need a good team. Um, Otherwise, that great idea is just an idea, and it doesn't really sort of get anywhere. It's just what could be. You know, and especially with like coaching you know, at the end of the day, it's the results that matter, right? You either need to consistently bring results to the stage, or you need to retain your clients and keep them happy. So those are two results that you really need to focus on. And if you're not achieving that, then you've got no business in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's not an easy task, but it's fun at the same time.
It's almost like the saying like, we have to enjoy the process more than the end outcome, which is part of
Good.
especially
Yeah.
businesses. Yeah.
It's like the most cliche, repetitive,
Yes.
reused thing,
Yeah.
but it's so relevant in every single thing that we do, like on a daily basis. It's just the minute you're like, shit, it's like the process, it's like, oh yeah, that's right. I got to try and enjoy this. It's like, ups and downs as well. You got to try and look at the downs and be like, okay, this is teaching me something. And then also when you're up and you're enjoying it, it's like, don't get too comfortable either, because it's not there forever either.
You can never it's you can't be happy either way. But you gotta
Yeah.
learn the happiness from each process. And I think it's like I think I saw like a reel where they're like saying don't like be careful, like don't enjoy the highs too much as well, because then like the
Yeah.
fallback's gonna be worse. So you almost have to like be like in control of your emotions both ways. So then that way you can
100%.
have a happy life. Yeah.
Yeah, like that. I kind of learned that from competing. Like I definitely, when you do, a lot of shows, you kind of have that same pattern of like the post-show blues and then like this really excited thing after you get off stage and then
Yep.
it's like really low. And like that teaches you in that regard, okay, I don't want to be, if I win the show, I don't want to be too excited and too happy because
Hmm.
I know what's coming after this. But I also have to think about really enjoying the moment and being appreciative and still excited and happy that I won because it's a big milestone. But then don't get too excited because if you sit there for even a day longer, there's a crash coming, and so you got to kind of almost be smiling but bracing at the same time.
Yes, be prepared.
Yeah.
Sweet. So I guess that brings me to my first question. Are you getting back on stage yourself?
Oh, I think I always toy with the idea of it. I think the more free time I have, the more consistent I am with my training, like as simple as that. And I think when I have consistent training, I always see little glimmers of like hope or whatever. I just personally don't think that because I know what's required to be my best.
Mhm.
And even if like you look good, there's a difference between looking good and being your best. Because at the end of the day, that's what I always preach to my athletes. Like you just got to keep being your best every single time you compete. And for me to show up and be my best ever, um, what's required to do that is I don't know if I'm willing to do it. So I think at this point in time with the business the way it is, and like my focus is on my team and just I guess trying to get myself as a person to certain places as well, not just business, but also like personal development. Like I'm more than just a bodybuilder.
Mhm.
So it's one of those things where I kind of know what I need to do. Um, I am capable of doing it, but I'm not willing to prioritize it over my self growth, the growth of my business and my team at the moment.
Mhm.
So I like to say like never say never, but at the same time, like it would have to be a really big shift in my life for that to be a priority again. Um, I still like to train and live like
Yeah.
I am. Like
Yeah.
I always randomly just get lean because I just prefer to be hungry and like I train consistently and I don't eat shit. So I get that outlet from that. I just don't think I necessarily need to go through the whole process
Mhm.
to be truly happy anymore. Like it's something that there's a little question mark over that, but I'm not sort of waking up in the morning going, I got to do that. And if you don't have that in your mind, then it's just not worth doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It has to be the first thing you think about and the last thing you think of before you go to sleep. Like it has to be you have to be infatuated with it for it to be a priority. For it to pay off too. Like you doing it at 70%, it's never going to be worth it. You're going to stand on stage and you're going to be like, oh, well, this is 70%. Awesome. That's fantastic. Even if you win, it's 70%.
Like deep down, you feel like personal progression isn't there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so like I think because I spent like I did 28 shows over
Yeah.
um from the age of 21 to 28. So it was
Yeah.
7 years I did that. Which is not, I mean, it's not a world record, but it's a lot of shows. And I think that the whole of my 20s, I was focused on being a bodybuilder and kind of ignored any other aspect of myself.
Hmm.
Um, so that's something I always try and bring to my coaching is like, yeah, it's really important to be a really good athlete and win,
Yeah.
but it's also just important to be a good partner and to have a good business and to act professional in all areas of your life because being a holistic professional in every single facet is going to allow you to go past your plateau as a bodybuilder or go past your plateau as a businessman. You're always going to have plateaus in different areas, and if you're able to multitask all of those progressions, you're never going to stop moving forwards. Whereas I found that I stopped because all of those other things were neglected. And
Hmm.
I got really good as a bodybuilder, like really good, and then nothing else was really equivalent in its progression. And so I had to kind of restart and kind of build that stuff back up. And I feel like I'm there, but I can kind of move the bodybuilding along without competing, I feel.
Yeah.
So progression as a bodybuilder for me is just learning and trying and experiencing and kind of being in the trenches rather than kind of standing on stage and being like, awesome, that's good for me now. It's like it doesn't sort of fulfill that progression. Um, and everyone has a different
Yeah.
what that looks like to them. Like that's for me is like it's this balance of things in a certain way, percentage. But I always say to people, it's like the most important thing is to figure out what's important to you and keep all of those things moving along so that you never end up in a position where something that's important to you didn't progress at the rate that you wanted. And so you stop everything else to pick it up. And it's very life-changing for that. And it just, yeah, from my experience, it's not, probably not the smartest way to do it.
I guess it's like that fulfillment factor as well, right? Like, do you think fulfillment's
Yeah.
part of it? Like, especially because you've done 28 shows, so the next show you compete, you know that everything has to still be working or progressing while you're
Yeah.
able to also complete that task of competing. And obviously, you know how hard the trenches are, especially in prep. Like it requires 100% focus, and it's super hard. Training's hard,
Yeah.
nutrition is hard. Like the level at which you have to be at, and you know that you have to be at. I think it definitely makes it more challenging to find like that fulfillment factor from it. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I mean, all of my inspiration when I was bodybuilding, like I was still in that kind of magazine era. That's when I started.
Yeah.
It's still that era. And like you look at the magazines and you're like, okay, obviously as I sort of started competing more, it was like there was more social media, there was Facebook, and then Instagram started. So there was starting to be more sort of influence from other people who were successful, but still it was never like, oh, I'm a successful bodybuilder and I'm also a successful businessman and I'm also a great husband and I'm also this and also this. It was always just how they looked, what they did to look that way, and they were so hardcore. And like, when you look at Jay Cutler in a magazine, you never think that he has like millions of dollars of property as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
You never think that. You think he just
Yeah.
sits at home and he's a bodybuilder, he does that. So as a young person, like nowadays, like so much, there's the exposure to like what's actually required is so easy. Whereas I feel like I'm not making excuses, but the influence I had was very kind of misled to a certain degree. And so I had to learn that for me
Yeah.
personally. I'm not saying that other people can't be just a bodybuilder and be happy, but for me personally, I was kind of led astray from what my values are. And so now it's like, for me, it's ensuring that I keep all of those things happy. Which if at some stage, like, I have enough time and like everything's lined up perfectly where I'm like, okay, well, I've got 5 hours free a day where I can add to posing practice and do all this stuff instead of going and doing something else in my time, like go like whatever people do, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I would bodybuild because that's what I love doing. So I think any free time that I have in the future is always going to be filled with bodybuilding. And if that
Mhm.
becomes free to the extent that I know I can do a prep or progress
Yeah.
enough, then I'll fill that time with that. That makes sense.
Yeah, and 100%. That
Yeah.
was very it gives us a deeper look of like why, competing might not be the best time for you right now, but like
Yeah.
you're not gonna say never as well. Like I feel like there will be a
No.
time where everything's like, you know what? I think everything's in a good spot right now. We're
Yeah.
progressing the way we want to in all aspects of life, and
Mm.
maybe this show might happen. So like it's like, okay, let's
Yeah.
get to the show. So I think it's like you can't be a master of is what's that saying go? Like the master of all trades?
Jack
Is
of all trades.
Jack of all trades, yeah. Jack of all trades and master of none. So you've got to focus on like other areas first, put your energy into that,
Yeah.
and then eventually come back to it. And I'm sure you come back more knowledgeable, more prepared, and also like you have that support network around you that's going to support you as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And that's, I think, it's not, people think, oh, you're not going to compete again. It's like the only thing that changes is like that last 5 weeks where you do commit to the show. Like maybe I'm not doing cardio at 11 p.m. at night because I couldn't get it in. Like obviously I prioritize sleep, business, all that stuff becomes a priority when you're not competing. But I still tick the boxes. Like when I sort of create the variables that I want to achieve for the week, like if I say, okay, I have to do 10,000 steps, I train 5 times, whatever it is, I still tick all of those things off. So just because I'm not competing doesn't mean I'm like fat and lazy, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
it's still 95% the same. The intention's slightly different. That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Um,
Just
and
very
that's
slightly. Yeah.
for most people, that's sort of like the biggest confusion is like, oh, you look like you could go to compete or you could compete, or why don't you just do it? It's like, well, that's not the decision. It's the full commitment to it. It's not necessarily any change to my lifestyle. I love living that way. It's just that final, it's like shaving your whole body and putting tan on. I just don't
Yeah.
do that right. Yeah.
Not ready for that to get the tan on, man. Does she just love that
Yeah.
smell of tan? Shit.
Oh, it's so good. But I get that hit from,
Yeah.
you know, coaching people to stage. Like, it's just for me, that's yeah, at the moment, I get so much more out of that. And so that's why I'm doing it.
Yeah, a passion for it. And
Yeah.
so would you like coach yourself or would you like get a coach if you do decide to jump on stage or you're just gonna do it yourself kind of thing? Have you thought about that?
Um,
Like,
yeah, I think that's the other thing too, is I would need to be in a position where like the coach that I work with is sort of very aware of what I'm trying to do and coaches me to that, and
mhm,
keeps me accountable and doesn't hesitate to kind of go, hey, get the whip out and do, sort of what I would do to my athletes.
yeah.
Um, so that would be, yeah, I would 100% need that, because the chances of me going, yeah, kind of not do that today, or just back off and not be my best. Like I also need someone to kind of go, hey, this is what you committed to do. Let's see it through. This is what I expect from you. You can be better than that. I would 100% need someone for sure.
Yeah. Have you ever thought about who it would be or like tossed up the idea in the back of your mind? Not really. I know it's throwing you on the spot,
Uh,
but yeah.
Not
No.
really, because um I think this is the thing for me, is like I'm very holistic with this whole thing. Like I'm very spiritual and I think very deeply about it. And I think at the right time, the right coach and the right relationship forms
Mm,
itself. If you go
yeah.
looking for it, you're probably going to find the wrong coach, right?
Yeah.
And I know this sounds weird, because the whole point of finding a coach that you can work with is looking and investigating and checking around and doing your research. But it has to come to you easily. Like you have to be
Hmm.
sort of like, you've got to have like almost like a thought, and then your thought is answered pretty much immediately. And then you find yourself looking at this coach who's got all the answers, and like you resonate with that. It doesn't, if you're sitting there like scrolling and doing your
Hmm.
research for hours and hours and hours, it's the same thing. It's like if you're single and you're trying to find a relationship on Tinder, you're probably going to find the wrong relationship. But if you're
Yeah.
just going about your life, focusing on being your best, and then you kind of like end up in this situation where it's going to work
Hmm.
for you, that, and you know it on a deep level, that's the best coach for you, because they haven't sold you anything. They haven't tried to kind of like poach you off another coach. They haven't charged you less just to get clout. It's like it's the right relationship. The coaching athlete relationship, it forms naturally. It's never
Hmm.
different for like lifestyle and kind of like just learning the basics. But when you're trying to do something extraordinary on stage, it has to be a very natural spiritual thing, because the right coach for you isn't the person who has the most pro cards or the most wins.
Yeah.
It could be definitely, but it's not always the case, because you have to have the same values, and you have to believe in the same things, and you
Hmm.
both want to you both need to have to want to succeed as equally as each other. It has to be the exact same amount. Um, because I'm sure people listening have had a relationship where it's quite good 90% of the time, but then there's
Hmm.
that little bit that just doesn't flow.
Yeah.
And that is so common in coaching, where you're very happy, everything's working, you're getting results, but something's not clicking. And you
Hmm.
just don't know what I feel it with some clients. Like we're killing it. We've won shows, but there's something just not quite there. Um, don't know what that is. Don't know what that is, but there's definitely some sort of energy, like spiritual thing in that. I think it's quite interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think I understand what you're trying to say. It's like
Yeah.
you just don't. completely click. It's like you guys don't like if you guys were outside of coach and client, you guys might not be friends or be just like at face
100%.
value, hey, going, like just say hi and then
Yeah.
that's it. But you wouldn't be like, let's go out for lunch and have a
Yeah.
meal together kind of thing. I think I get what you're trying to say. Yeah.
100%, bro. And when you this is what people forget is like, yes, there has to be an authoritative position as a coach. You can't be on that friendship level all the
Yeah.
time. You have to be
Yeah.
able to separate that. Like, and if you can't clearly define those two things and your athlete can't clearly define those two things, then you get stuck on one of those levels, right?
Yeah.
Um, because it's not like I'm your boss and I'm telling you what to do and I expect results. I've got to also be there for you. I've got to understand you. I've got to spend time with you. I've got to prioritize you above me. And
Hmm.
that has to be trust built both ways. It can't just be, oh, I'm paying you. And so therefore you've got to sit there at 11 p.m. and answer my questions. Doesn't
Yeah.
work that way. If you have trust and you have a great relationship, that's just going to happen naturally. It's like, but then also there's an authoritative position where you can trust the person to tell you what you need to hear as well. It's like, it's very, very close to friendship, but not quite. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like you can't blur the lines too
Yeah.
much. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think, yeah, that's and then a lot of people also have, like that a lot of people have issues with that building that trust because of their experiences they've already had.
Mm,
And they're constantly trying to search for that thing. It's like, and I believe that's truly key. So for me, but to answer your question, to find a coach, it would need to be, I would personally need to be at a time where I'm ready for that.
mhm.
And then I know that, like, in the right circumstances, I'll literally have a conversation with someone. It'll be natural, and I'll just be like, this is the person. Like, this is how I'm going to work with this person, or I'll
Mhm.
ask them. You know what I mean? I won't be doing like Instagram research and then find someone who I think is going to work. It's not going to work that way. It has to be more sort of natural, you know?
Yes, no, no, I totally feel you. I definitely use a lot of what we call gut feelings. It's like kind of like
100%.
this
Yeah.
just seems right. Like it just seems like the right
Yeah.
choice to make.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
sweet.
Sometimes if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. And like,
Mhm.
it's like, that's the buyers beware thing is like, you know, if you fall for them, the marketing's important because as a
Mm,
coach, you have to position yourself in the right position to get people to trust you and form that sort of first conversation.
mhm.
But if it's all that you have, then you're kind of like misleading someone to believe that you have what
Yeah,
they want when it's really not. So as a coach, it's your responsibility to position yourself and market yourself for what you actually have. So it
yeah,
has to work both ways, and that's where the trust begins. So like, and I think people can genuinely feel that, like they can actually tell if your marketing is genuine, like,
yeah.
or whether it's just a thing that works,
Mm,
So for me, it's hard because like I don't really talk to many coaches, but I see a lot of coaches on Instagram, obviously. Um, but there's also just a lot of marketing, so it's
yeah.
hard to, like, being a coach and being an athlete. I'm like, well, how the hell am I supposed to find myself in a conversation with someone that I would want, to work with? So yeah, it's weird.
No, I love that. And so like with the qualities, obviously now going back to business. So like
Yeah.
what are the qualities that make up a 1% athlete or client?
Yeah.
Is there like
Quality.
because you did mention a bit like you guys have to have the same values and stuff. So what do you guys hold as a team? Because now you got a team of coaches. What is
Yeah.
something you breed as like your okay, these are the values that I hold by, and the company is obviously gonna go in that direction. Like you guys have to have similar values and similar core beliefs in what you do. Like is there something in particular that comes to mind? Like have you thought about this? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, man. A one percenter is someone who knows what they need to do, but goes above and beyond. So like you don't want to be average. You know you've got a big job ahead of you and you're ready for, it's about fulfilling the task and then some, because you understand. It's like if you are one of those people that, okay, you clean your room and then at the very end you walk out and you see something not quite straight, you go over there and you straighten it. You know what I mean? That's what a one percenter is. It's like doing the job, but then refining it to be beyond perfect.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and obviously that's not always achievable. But that's, if you have that mindset, you what I consider a one percenter, because it's the difference between good and great is that 1%. It's not
Mhm.
it's not being motivated and having a morning routine and you know, assuming that because you're really disciplined and consistent, that's all it takes. No, it's not at all. It's you got to do that because everyone else is, and then you have to go 1% extra. And that's how you win. In everything, you know what I mean? So 1%ers are that top, it's like the cream, you know what I mean? It's the top layer of
Yes.
people who
Yeah.
go way beyond what is necessary. Um, because not because they have to, but because they want to. It's part of their brain, their
Yeah.
genetic makeup. Um, and so like that can come across in anything you do. Like if you're a you know, like any sport or any profession, or it doesn't have to necessarily be fitness, but obviously because we're a bodybuilding company, it's about competing. But as coaches, we share the same mindset because we're athletes. We live that way. We have that same sort of passion to be our best in every area, and we're trying to be, we're trying to aim for the top 1% of anything
Yeah.
that we do. So it's a very competitive team. It's a very competitive sort of mindset, and the culture is just, I don't know. You put it like it's like when we went to dinner after our show. Like we had a team of athletes, and I was there. Like one of the other coaches was there. We had it was like a very competitive nature. It's like who gets the biggest meal and who has eats the most, and like whose diet is cleanest at dinner post show. Like it never, no one's relaxed. It's like always competitive. Everyone wants to win every time. That's what
Yeah.
1%. Yeah.
No, I love that. And do you think it's something you can develop, or it's something that is your genetic makeup? You did mention that a little bit. Yeah.
I think everyone has it to a certain degree. Like if you find something you're passionate about, um, I think that you can develop it. I think it is a skill, but
Mhm.
there is definitely a natural instinct there that you can't necessarily teach. If someone doesn't have that competitive nature, they're probably most likely going to be more of a nurturer. Like they might just be, and there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean you're a lesser of a person. It
Mm.
definitely just has to be built into your brain though, to a certain extent. Um, I think if it's there to a degree, you can kind of make it stronger.
Yeah.
Um, and that comes down to like your environment and like the people you hang around and like being coached correctly. Um, a lot of my athletes are always saying like, is it weird that I want to be strict with my diet all the time? And I'm like, no. And they're like,
Mhm.
oh, well, everyone's telling me that it's off season and I can relax. And I'm like, yeah, but you're a 1%er. So
Yeah.
like, don't lean away from who you
Yeah.
are, lean into it, and sort of embrace it and like that's who I am. I don't want to eat pizza all the time.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a natural thing, but a lot of the time as humans, we're kind of like societal pressure and like the norms and like, the government and all this suppression is teaching you to kind of blend in and be normal. Um, when really we want to be, you know, it's not about being abnormal, but it's about being exactly who you are and excelling at that. You might be a singer or anything, but if you don't accept what other people are telling you to do and you kind of just want to lean into who you are and you're kind of
Hmm.
afraid of that, that means you've got that built into your brain and you should lean into it. And that's kind of the best athletes I work with are those people who kind of know that about themselves and don't really quite know how to activate it.
Yeah.
And we kind of just block out all noise and just focus on chasing that little voice. And as soon as they find that, it's crazy what they can do with their bodies.
Love that. If hypothetically, if a person comes to you, let's say a client looking to compete, comes to you super motivated, super pumped up, they go into the prep phase, they're killing it, they're doing everything they need to do behind the scenes. They get about 5 weeks out and they start to slip a little bit here and there. Do you continue on with the show, or do you tell them, nah, you're pulling out? What do you do? Hypothetically.
Have they slipped up once or more than once, or is it just once?
Or let's say they slipped up once, they ruined, or like, let's say, ooh, that's a tough one because I feel like that's going to determine that it's all
Yeah.
right. Okay, let's say 3 times in prep, the entire prep. So
So,
let's say it's a 20, how long is your prep phase normally? Like 20, like
oh,
let's say
20 weeks, 20,
20
10,
weeks?
20.
Yeah, so 3 times in 20 weeks. Or like, yeah, let's just say that. Let's say
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So am I finding out for the first time?
Yeah, you only find out at that 5 week out mark that they've
And
slipped
I've
up a
found
few
out about,
times.
and they've cheated 3 times and I'm only finding out just now.
Yes.
Do they look awesome?
Okay, let's say like they can pull it in just in time.
Okay.
Like based on, obviously experience, like you're like, you know what,
Yeah,
they could still make it,
yeah,
but their mindset's not in the right place.
yeah, yeah. I would have a conversation. Okay, so obviously if I've worked with this person for a while, I'll know what they're capable of doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I probably would already picked up on this. If I haven't worked this person and I'm like, I'm oblivious to this, and then this is the first time I'm hearing about it, and I'm shocked. I'm genuinely shocked. Then I would want to know the triggers, and I would also want to know where their headspace is at and what's motivating them now.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
generally, what I don't want to do is say, okay, because you've cheated, the everything's done, like you fucked up, like that's the punishment. I don't want to be that person, but I also want to be careful because if we do continue and it happens again, then the more often you persist with something and continue to make the same mistake, the less the more confidence you lose because you're basically
Mm.
teaching yourself that you're not able to do something. It's like it's like reminding you and confirming that you aren't able to do something.
Yeah.
So you the most important thing would be to break that habit. So if we need to stop doing the prep to break the habit, then that's what we do.
Mm-hmm.
But if we can go through the next week and not cheat, you know what I mean? Then I'm like, okay, cool. We've kind of taken the first step to break that habit.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go through next week and see if we can do that. And if we get sort of another couple of weeks down the track and everything's good, then I'm like, okay, we can get through to the prep and you've kind of broken that habit, you've rebuilt that confidence, and the likelihood of things going sour post show are less likely because that's what I'm concerned with. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I think at that point in time, I'm more concerned with like what's motivating them to continue because I'm already worried that they're not motivated enough to actually do it in the first place.
Yeah.
So I want reassurance from them that they want this. I want to know. I'm not on hands and knees begging, but I want to feel the energy that they are truly, really wanting to do
Mm-hmm.
it. So that would just be a conversation. I'd usually have a pretty long conversation where I'm trying to figure that out. And then I would probably just position or like prospect two scenarios where I'm like, hey, what would happen if you didn't do the show? What would be the plan?
Mm-hmm.
And what would happen if you did this show and you didn't do well? Like, let's go through some scenarios and you tell me how you're going to feel about that because
Mm-hmm.
the likelihood of you not doing well is higher than you doing well because there's only one person can win, right?
Yes.
So we have to be prepared to not do well, but we also have to be prepared that if you don't do well and you've had this sort of like less than 100% effort, are you okay with that? Putting something like that on stage and accepting that. So it's kind of like sort of going through those scenarios and just getting reassurance from the person that this is what they want. These are the things they're trying to achieve. And then this is a blimp on the radar in the overall scheme of things. Or if it's really, not a good deal, then we have to pause the prep, set a new timeline and kind of like work out what's triggering that person. Maybe they're not truly aligned with
Mm-hmm.
it. Maybe it's just a lot of stress in their life. Like there might be something going on in the background that we haven't quite looked at. Um, so at the end of the day, it's all about this person being their best. So, if their best to this point is 3 cheat meals in their
Yeah.
prep, then we're already at their best. So we can
Yeah.
only improve from there. But if they did a prep previously and they didn't cheat, whereas this time they did, well, you got to determine whether that's their best at that point, and usually it's not. So, um, yeah, it's more about the mindset that allows someone to do that rather than whether they're actually ready or not. Because a cheat meal is technically just calories, and obviously it skews the data. But does it prevent this person from being their best psychologically, and what's the impact on them visually as a result of that?
Mm.
Um, so it would just be a conversation. I usually wouldn't just can it straight away. I'm not sort of emotional like that. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more concerned with the person's headspace, and
Yeah.
that me like I'm always kind of like, oh shit, it's not about the progression or regression. It's more like, oh, if you are a winner and you're coming into the show and you just want to give it everything, you don't allow yourself a cheat meal. It doesn't happen. You just
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
Even if someone tells you to, you probably just don't want it because you just want to do whatever you possibly can to be your best. So, generally athletes that I've worked with where I'm like, okay, you're in a really good position. You can have a free meal if you really want one. They're like, no, I don't want one. you know, they just don't. They don't want to
Yeah.
cheat. They don't want to break plan. They want to stay exactly where they are because they know that that's the best place for them mentally.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you know, dealing with your mindset and physique and the body for 2, 3 days after a cheat meal is tough. You have to
Yeah.
be you have to be somewhat mentally stronger to deal with that than it is to just not have it, you know? Um,
Yeah, your body, you get the indigestion, the reflux. It's
yeah,
the worst.
yeah,
I mean, I've done it before in the past, like one show, like 10 years ago, my very first show. You just slip. You just didn't know what was the norm back then, you know?
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you realize that you just
Mm.
spent like when you do that, you wake up the next day and you spend the next 3 days stressing about this thing. And that stress that you've got for 3 days where you're like, fuck, I gotta get rid of
Yeah.
this feeling is so much worse than just being hungry, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
oh my God, like it's such a shit feeling where you feel like you fucked everything up and you're like just a loser, you know? Um, but like when you're hungry, you're like, okay, I'm hungry because I'm a badass. I'm killing it. I'm lean. You know,
Mhm.
I'm starving. I'm fatigued. I'm stressed. Like everything's that's about right. That's where I should be, you know? And so that the more experienced and focused an athlete is, the more they want that. They're like, I want more of that feeling because that's
Mhm.
reassurance and I'm heading the right direction. Um, the minute you feel comfortable, you know, be very, very careful. Like the more comfortable you feel at any time in your life, you should be very concerned, I
Yeah.
believe. You know, it's like I don't know if I've heard that somewhere or like whether, yeah, I think I have read it somewhere. It's like, you know, be very careful of when you feel comfortable because you're probably not where you should be. Like maybe momentarily on a holiday or something, but like if you're comfortable most of the time, you're probably doing something wrong, you know, in anything like business, relationships, everything. Like get too comfortable, it's over, you know?
Yeah, 100%. And so that brings me to my next question. So another question I'm gonna chuck on you. So
Yeah,
let's say
yeah,
hypothetically that, a client is obviously to be team one percenters, right? You've got to
yeah,
be doing those 1% of things that people don't see. So it does sound like it's the stuff that, maybe adjusting your hat or putting this, I don't know, putting something back properly, like putting the fork
yeah,
where the fork should be. Just that sort of things that people don't see, right? I would
yeah,
assume it's something along those lines. That's what it sounds like. So if
yeah,
someone comes to you in the off season, right? So like let's say they're going into the off season, but they don't want to be 100%. They want to be like 80%, like still eat, still enjoy training and stuff like that, but they want to be only 80%. Do you need to be top 1%, as in being perfect in that reverse, like not doing any free meals until later on, obviously, unless the coach says? Do
mhm.
you think that you have to be that strict in the off season to
No,
make growth? Yeah.
no, because you define the framework. And that's the cool
Mm.
thing about being a one percenter. You can if you want to sit on a rock and stare at the wall, be the best version of that. Like you kill it. You
Yep,
know what I
yep.
mean? And don't you stare at anything else. You know what I mean? Like that a one percenter
Yeah.
will do everything to the best. So if they're going to have like a free meal, they're going to make the best burger that they can. It's going to be delicious. They're going to make it look good on the plate. Like that's what a one percenter is. It's not about being perfect. It's just about doing what you're doing to the best of your ability. So if you're a single father of three, and you don't have the time to do this and this and this, it's not that you're not a one percenter, it's that you are accepting your limitations and you've built a framework that you're happy with. And that's what I do as a coach. I look at that scenario and I go, okay, you can't do this, but we can build this around what you're
Mhm.
accepting and what you're willing to do. And then generally those people, because they're not aware that they can still get results, they absolutely crush it because they have that mindset where you give them something that they can fulfill and succeed at, they will. You know, it's just building
Mhm.
whatever that structure looks like. So if someone said, okay, I don't want to be overly strict, but I still want to grow muscle tissue, like basically if someone has like doesn't want to be overly strict and they're saying like I want to be 80-20, I'm like, okay, cool. I would have to work out, I would have to identify why that's the case. And if it's out of their control or they just prefer it and they're self-actualizing is hard, like they just know that about themselves and they know that to be successful, they have to do this,
Mhm.
then I would always challenge that. And I'd be like, okay, well, let's try this, let's try that. But if it works out that this is the way they are and they're never going to change, then we just excel at that. You know what I mean? We set a framework around a plan around that
Yeah.
understanding And then, chances are that person starts to kill it because it's not their mindset that's the problem. It's just the limitations or their
Hmm.
preferences. It's like,
Yeah.
it'd be like if I said, you got to eat a kilo of tuna a day and someone didn't like tuna.
Yeah.
Well, we just because they don't eat tuna doesn't mean they're not going to get omega-3s from something else. You know what I mean? We've got to set a plan up that they're able to achieve the results they want at, and then they can excel, and then they can be a 1%er at it.
Love that. No, that's a very good answer. Thank you
Yeah,
for that. I just threw that on ya.
yeah, that's all right.
Okay, so what makes 1%ers Australia's number one coaching team? We probably did a touch on it a little bit, but do you want to
Yeah.
elaborate a little bit more? Yeah.
Well, obviously there's a level of bias in that because it's my brand, it's my baby.
Hmm.
But I believe like just that mindset, that attitude towards delivering a service,
Hmm.
but also the mindset that the athletes have to strive for that same goal. If we
Yeah.
if we synergistic and we understand that,
Hmm.
we come into this sort of process with the same work ethic, the
Yeah.
same, attention to detail, and that synergy creates the best results. So
Yeah.
I don't think that I'm not saying that other teams can't achieve good results. I just believe that if you're positioning yourself around that understanding, then you're
Hmm.
going to be the best. You know what I mean?
It's like a
So
mission statement.
yeah,
Like,
literally, bro. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly right. It's like a 1%er would believe they're the best. Like that's just the way
Yeah.
that they are. They believe they're the best at what they do because no one else can do it. Like that saying, it's like you are the best at being you.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
That's that's what that mission statement is. It's like we're the best at doing this because no one else does it like this.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that other people can't get results. Like there's fantastic coaches, amazing athletes all the time, competing, winning pro cards, all that sort of stuff. That's their method. You know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
that's fantastic. Go for it. But we're the best at doing it like this.
Love that. That was a great answer. Another great
Yeah.
answer. So, amongst the the best coaches in Australia for comp prep, what makes you different? I guess you kind of did answer that a little bit. So, obviously,
Yeah.
the same thing applies. Yeah.
I think also
Mm.
a long-term vision. Like I always have, like, especially with athletes that come to the team and they want to compete and they want to turn pro or they want to win a pro show, whatever it is. I have a long-term vision. So I always want to work with someone for as long as I possibly can. I want to plan what they're doing in 5 years. I want to have like a very holistic approach to it. So I wouldn't necessarily call myself just a comp prep coach because, you know, 90% of what I do is off season. There's
Yeah.
very small, if an athlete is well prepared, the amount of time they're preparing for the show truly, like actually, in that sort of prep phase becomes shorter and shorter over time.
Yeah.
Like the longer I work with someone, the shorter that prep phase actually gets. Like you can end up starting with a 30-week prep when I first work with you. And then over time that becomes 16 weeks or sometimes even 12 weeks because
Mm.
we don't get far away from where we need to be and we're sort of
Hmm.
progressing by rate. So I think what makes me different is just my vision. Like I always look
Hmm.
so much further ahead. And like whilst the result at the first show is important, I always think what's best for this athlete if what's best for this person in 5 years. Like what can I do right now that's going to make the person they are now better and a better athlete in 5 years' time. And so that's always how I make decisions. Obviously, I want to win and I want to do what I possibly can to win everything.
Yeah.
But that's that I would say that's probably the biggest difference between me and other coaches is I always think long
Yeah.
term for the athlete.
That's a great way to look at it. It's not just the one show, but it's like, what are you doing outside of that? Like the reverse,
Yeah,
you're thinking into the future of like, you got to focus on all these areas. And then as you keep staying with the one coach, you get more experience as a coach
yeah,
to like figure out exactly what works, what doesn't, what worked
exactly.
last time, what you can improve on this time. And it's just that self progression. Yeah.
Yeah. If you've got a situation where you've got a big decision to make for an athlete and it could affect their placing, right? But it
Hmm.
also could affect their future,
Yeah.
then for me, I always pick the future. I'm always like, okay, what's the best thing for this person's future? And is that going to contribute to a better placing as well? Like, I always want to kind of like influence the placing as best I can, but I'm never going to choose the placing over the future ever in that decision. I'm never going to go, oh, it's going to ruin their mindset and make them misunderstand the process and like, give them a false sense of security about their potential
Mhm.
because like winning a show, but not having the right mindset or the right tools in their like arsenal to make them a better athlete long term is almost like it's like it's like a disservice. It's like almost like a lie.
Mhm.
They,
Yeah.
they have this sort of false sense of achievement, and then when they're really thrown in the deep end, when they end up further down the track, you haven't taught them what they need to know.
Mhm.
And so that to me is like it's good short-term coaching because you've got really good results, but it's poor coaching because you're not getting this person to where they actually really want to be, unless
Mhm.
that person only wants to win and they don't care about their future. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah.
And that's where it comes down to the values being the same.
Sweet. Thank you for that. So with a division, so I got another question for you. So what division do you enjoy coaching the most if you had to choose? So I know you do coach a lot of different clients in different
Yep.
divisions, but if you had to choose one, you're number one. You can't like say, oh, I know you enjoy them all because you can't
Yeah.
be biased. But if you had to choose one division, which one would it be?
Oh,
That one
God
put you on
damn.
this one.
Yeah, because like
You have clients in all divisions. So
yeah,
if you
and
had to
like some people are gonna message me and be like, why don't you like coaching this division? I thought you loved coaching. I love coaching everything. I think I think from a purely competitive perspective,
hmm
um, this has nothing to do with the people that I coach
Yeah,
or
yeah.
or anything to do with like
So
my
with a
personal
disclaimer here that he's
yeah.
not gonna like anyone don't come
Yeah.
and abuse Tim just because he chose this.
I can honestly say every single one of my clients I would like literally have dinner with and like spend time with and like
hmm
like we have really close relationships. All of my clients I do, so it's got nothing to do with that. But from a purely competitive perspective, bikini to me is like another beast. It's like there's so much that goes into it that people don't realize that it's so enjoyable when you've got someone who's passionate about it to coach them for it because there's so much involved. And like for someone who loves details and data and like the minutia of bodybuilding,
hmm
that's what I really love. Like some small tweak can change like the whole scenario. Like it creates a ripple effect and then it becomes a tidal wave. And so I'm a true bodybuilding fan as well, but like from a competitive standpoint, for the actual stage part, bikini is probably the most enjoyable because there's so many ways to improve and there's so many things that you can do without being bigger. Um,
hmm
whereas for other categories, the main catalyst is development, which is also something I love that so much because it's my bread and butter. You know what I mean? Like, but for most athletes in other divisions, generally we're always trying to develop the physique to improve.
hmm
Um, so it becomes very kind of just not easy, but like it's very obvious what we're doing. It's like we got to do this first. Obviously, yes, all these things matter. Presentation, your tan, like your the way you hold yourself as an athlete on stage,
hmm
presentation. It's important, but it's not as important for as it is for bikini. So you can have the best physique, the best the program, like your techniques, everything's perfect, and then your hair's a little bit strange, and then you that affects your mindset on stage, and you're not confident, you don't place. You know
hmm
what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So for someone who's very competitive, I find that just, I don't know, it's like endlessly enjoyable. You know what I mean?
So you're
Yeah.
saying bikini. So you put it out to yeah.
Bikini for sure. Yeah. From a competitive standpoint, I think like obviously, bodybuilding is my, that's where I've come from. So I have,
hmm
that's where I have probably the most, it hits a soft spot, right? Like
hmm
I'm a fan. I'm such a fan of bodybuilding in general. But yeah, bikini, and I would say wellness second to that, just purely for the fact that
Sweet.
it's another one where you have to be really strategic. It's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
asymmetry aspect. It's the condition, but it's not the
hmm
dryness and the graininess. It's like there's so much strategy in the peaking, and there's so much strategy in the lead up to it. Um, whereas getting someone dry and peeled and full is there's strategy involved, but it's a repetitive process where once you've got the process down pat for the person, you just rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
Um, so I feel like it's far easier to get it right for a classic or a bodybuilder or a men's physique. Probably not as easy for men's physique because it's very specific as well. But when you get over to bikini and wellness, it's like there's so many variables to that part. The fact that it's so hard is like
Mm-hmm.
the enjoyable part. Yeah.
No, I definitely no, I get what you're trying to say. Like hopefully the listeners do kind of understand the enjoyment
Yeah.
as a coach because there's so many moving parts, especially
Yeah.
in bikini. And when you think about it, there's so many divisions in the female categories, which I
Yeah.
think like makes it even harder. It's not just a size game. It's like you've got to have size, but not too much size. But you've also have to have the right development in the right
Yeah.
areas, and you have to have that balanced physique. And then your makeup matters, your bikini matters, your posing really,
Yeah.
really matters. Um, and then obviously you're dealing with females as well with like
Mm.
hormones and all of that, which you still do
Mhm.
with males as well, but like you're also
Yep.
dealing with other moving variables that you have to consider. And
Yeah.
so it does become way more challenging as a coach to kind of
Yep.
like pinpoint and get that right. Whereas most dudes will just be like, yeah, you just gotta put on more size, these are the areas you need to work on. Perfect. We just got to put on
Yeah.
size. Yeah. Or like,
Exactly. Yeah.
balance out your physique a little bit more. And it's generally like conditioning wise on like the pro level, I feel like everyone's the same. Like, especially in the males, like the men's physique dudes are as shredded as I think
Yeah.
bodybuilders. If
Yeah.
anything, I mean, they may question to say that they are leaner, but I feel like on the top level, everyone's peeled. Like, it's just
Yeah.
straightforward.
I think the waist, how tight the waists are and how little
Mm,
the structures are make them appear leaner. And
mm,
like,
mm.
it's like it's the same thing when like natural guys get leaner. It's like, well, I don't think they get leaner. They just have a smaller frame, and so their cuts appear to make them look leaner because it has more of an impact. It's like if someone's smaller in physicality or muscularity, sorry,
Yeah.
the, they're just all striations. It's all
Yeah.
striations, all cuts. Whereas if you've got round, bubbly muscle, it's going to push through the striations. It's going to look rounder and fuller. It's not necessarily going to appear as lean because
Yeah.
it's just more muscle. So yeah, I think at that top level, you're right, man. It's like everyone's shredded, until you
Yes.
go and sit at a pro show live, you don't know what it's like, especially the Olympia level.
Or even the bikini girls. I think when they chuck on a tan, you don't notice how shredded these girls are unless you see them before a tan. And I've seen them in person. I'm like, these girls have striations. Like it's crazy.
Yeah,
And they put the tan on and it kind of washes out a little bit, but they hide it really well on stage. Like they just
yeah,
pose
exactly.
perfectly. But I'm telling you, these girls in bikini have shredded glutes. Like they're literally
Yeah, for
like you
sure.
see the rippling effect, and you're like, man, that's freaking hectic. Like
Yeah,
everyone's on that level.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, everyone, even the
Yeah.
judges peeled.
Yes. The judges watch it.
Yeah,
So, how do you manage all your clients and coaches? Obviously, you got a lot of clients, a lot of coaches. How do you manage everything? Obviously, that's probably one of the reasons why it's hard for you to be like, I'm going to go all in and commit to a
yeah,
show and do that, get into diet brain and low energy, all of that. But how do you kind
yeah.
of manage all of that? Like, what's your secret for the business listeners?
I don't think there's a secret, man. I think it's just like it's like anything, when you do a comp prep and you've got all these moving parts that you've just got to set up your day in such a way that if you do what you've planned to
Mm-hmm.
do, the job will get done. And that's how I kind of try and set up my week. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
definitely have weeks where I don't do what I tried, wanted to do. Like that's normal. But I definitely try and set up my week so that if I just do everything that I've set on my calendar to do,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't really have to think too much about it. I just kind of show up to all those things, make sure I tick the boxes, and we slowly move forwards. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's kind of like being a bodybuilder and being so sort of heavily involved with that. That's kind of taught me how to be, in some ways, good at managing business because
Mm-hmm.
it's the same. It's technically the same. It's just repetitive, monotonous tasks over and over and over, with a general understanding that you're moving in one direction. If you do those things,
Mm-hmm.
then 6 months later you'll be where you want to be, rather than sort of trying to get there now, doing too much and then burning out. It's like you got to kind of just set up something that you can
Mm-hmm.
complete with the schedule you have, and just tick the boxes every week. Just do it every single week. Show up and do it, and then before you know it, it's 2024, and you've kind of almost a third of the way. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah, I
but
can't
you
believe
got
it's already been a year now thinking about it since we last
yeah,
spoke. And I'm like, it's actually been a year. I'm like, shit, it's already like
crazy.
July. It
Yeah,
literally flew by.
yeah, exactly. And
Crazy.
it's also like, you know, kind of like, I think for me as well is not necessarily trying to, like something that I've been doing the last year is just closing off applications. Like I work with the select, select athletes that inquire. And then obviously we've got lifestyle coach and Sam's female coach as well. So pump prep coach. So she shares the load a little bit. But it's kind of like just working with, not overfilling your roster and making
Mhm,
sure that the work you do is consistent and quality
mhm.
and because, you know, at the end of the day, that's what drives your business forward is
Yeah.
being good at it. And so like if you're doing it's like if you're doing something to jeopardize your training and you're not training at your max capacity, then you're doing things that aren't going to be productive to your growth in 6 months. So it's the same
Mhm.
with business. If I take on every single client that inquires, then yes, I might be making more money and I might be essentially growing, but I'm not necessarily making sure that my results are as good as they could be and being, pushing the actual business forward. So I'm by doing that, I'm doing something that's not necessarily productive to the growth of the business, even though it's
Mhm.
considered growing. So that's kind of like it's the same thing is just assessing what you need to be doing to grow and then focusing on those things so that regardless of the noise, you know that if you do that and you show up, then in 6 months' time you will have progressed.
Love that. And
Yeah.
so I did get some listener questions, right? So I
Oh
think
yeah.
Sam asked one of your coaches.
Oh
She
yeah.
asked, "Would you compete in FMG or stay with the IFBB?" Has she asked you this question?
No, no, never. It's just a good question. Because I think
Yeah.
it's probably coming from the fact that
Mm,
we were pushing towards IFBB when I was coach. When we
mm,
first started working together, she was like IFBB, IFBB, and we went through this massive thing where we were trying to make her physique
yeah.
IFBB. We're just pushing shoulder width and you know glutes and all these sort of IFBB traits, right? Which is standard bikini anyway, but more so the fact. Um, and then we got to like 14 weeks out or something. I think maybe like close to like 12 weeks. I think maybe 14. I don't know. And she sent me a message one day. She's like, so what do you think about it was called WFF back then, but she's like, what do you think about FMG? And I was like, huh? What? What do you mean? Like, are you joking? And she's like, no, I want to do this show. I think I'd be good at it. And I just like I sat there looking at my computer for like an hour just trying to figure out whether it was like cryptic or like she was like, oh, is there like a camera on me like
Yeah.
punk? Because
She's
like we've
punking
been
you right now.
yeah, it's like we've been working so hard at this goal.
Yeah.
But then she sent me a video of her posing with the
Mhm.
WFF, the FMG poses, and I was like, yeah, okay, we're gonna do this. It was just perfect for her. There's something about it that I was like, yeah, she's gonna kill it at this. Um, and so we had to from that moment adjust her training to be more suited to the FMG category criteria, which was like we just cut shoulders out completely. Um, and just like focus on like fullness and like shape and posing, that sort of stuff. And she came second at that in that first show, which is awesome. But then later it went on to win. So I think she's joking because of what she put me through, technically. I think. I
Yeah,
don't know.
do you think? So wait, but would you? So as the question, would you actually compete in FMG or like you just gonna stay IFBB?
Oh,
Yeah, if
no,
you had,
I don't think I have when I look at my physique, I don't have the look for that. Like for FMG, in my opinion, you need to look almost your best when you're standing still. Like just if you have a
mm,
really good physique just standing like this, then you can build from there. But if you have to pose to show your physique, then you're gonna get destroyed by guys that can just stand there and kind of like do this and have that aesthetic, criteria down pat. So for me, nah, definitely not. I would always be IFBB. I think for me too, it's like I'm so focused on the physique aspect rather than,
mhm.
the sort of I guess the I do like posing routines, but I just like posing. I don't like the sort of, you know, the the
The glitz and the
marketability.
glamour. Yeah, yeah.
The marketability.
Oh, that's actually a criteria, I'm pretty sure. Is it not?
It is. It
Marketability
is.
is a
Yeah, yeah,
criteria.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So like I think for me, because I'm so technical,
yeah.
I
Mhm.
can coach it because it's not an emotional thing for me. But if I got beaten by someone who just was better looking than me, I'd be like, well, fuck, like how am I? You kind of feel a little bit hopeless there,
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, I think for me it would just be I'd be too sort of self-critical of like,
Hmm.
I get all of the facial fillers and Botox and like,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, I just have to be overly so that I could do my best. Like, not that I think the federation's fantastic. I really, really like what they're doing. I think that for guys who do have that look, it's such a good
Mm,
entry point to the industry. And I think
yeah.
that the way that their shows run are like next level. Like if
Mm,
I was to choose a production value, especially in Australia, it's like FMG's probably got the standard at the moment. But IFBB is just it's just the best. You can't beat IFBB just from the historical standpoint and like what it represents. If you
yeah.
become an IFBB pro, it's like you've made it essentially.
Yeah, it's the highest, well, like it's got the most respect among IFBB pros. Yeah,
Yeah,
just the
yeah,
hardest competition. It's like the best of the best, versus in a very subjective sport. I mean,
yeah,
all bodybuilding federations are subjective. So, but at least you know that it's okay. This is the standard. This is
yeah,
what Olympia is. This is what it's gonna be. Like, it's not gonna be like this guy's better looking this period. You lost,
yeah.
which will kind of
I,
suck because you put in all that hard physical work to get
yeah,
judged on. You're like, this guy's more marketable.
literally, yeah. But I think like if I could, then I probably would. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
if I had that sort of, if I could see that, if I could see myself doing that, like and being successful at it, I would because it's such a good opportunity.
Hmm.
Um, so I think guys like who have that look and have that sort of marketability about them and can really show off and say like if they have that built into their personality, then it's such a good way to go for sure.
Yes, and all the finesse and stuff. There's probably a lot of
Dude,
that.
yeah,
Like you had to
yeah,
move your hands. You're like pretty much dancing on
yeah,
stage. But yeah, as a dude.
yeah, yeah.
Easy. And then the next listener question: do you take a different approach for your pro athletes to your amateur athletes?
No, no. I think that you've got to coach the athlete for where they're at. And it is like I still work with some lifestyle athletes, but they're very serious. Their lifestyle. They don't want to get on stage. They don't want to compete, but they're still somewhat more professional than some pros. Like so. I think you treat an athlete for where they're at, and I think if I work with a pro and they're still
Hmm.
behaving like an amateur, I've got to coach them to be the pro, right? So
Yeah.
like I don't just sort of treat someone different because they've got some status. I kind of ignore that. I don't really care. If you've won the Olympia and you've come to me and you like want to improve, I don't care that you won the Olympia because it's not about that. It's about you wanting to improve. So I got to look at everything that you're doing currently and figure out where you can improve.
Mm.
That's all that we're doing as coaches. So, if someone's won 5 pro shows and they want to win 6,
Yep.
we're not going to do that by being the same. So
Yes.
we've got to identify how to improve. And that's literally from the beginning of your journey to the end is always looking for ways to improve.
Love that. And so we're gonna finish off with two more questions. So they're similar questions, but one's gonna be for coaches and athletes. So what's your top piece of advice for coaches? Listen to this
Um,
podcast. If you had any advice.
well, so are we talking about like comp prep coaching here?
Well, okay, yeah. You know what? Comp prep coaching. Yeah, we'll comp prep coaching. We'll do comp prep coaching or just
Yep.
yeah, comp prep coaching. Yeah.
So if they're already a prep coach or they want to become one.
They might be becoming one, there might be a current one.
Yep.
Anything that you can think of. Yeah.
I think I think you have to really understand like
Hmm.
what your knowledge is and what you're actually capable of. I think being really honest with yourself about what you actually can do and can't and don't know, that being genuine like that and actually being open about that and seeking to improve is what attracts people because you might fool a few people, but you're never going to fool the ones that you really want to work with. And so you've got to coach if you're at a certain level of experience and you actually don't know what you're doing
Hmm.
completely. You've got to gain experience, and so the best
Hmm.
way to do that is to work with people that you can help first. So you
Yeah.
start on the very entry level. Like you might work with a lifestyle client and like kind of get them to the point where they can compete, and then you kind of chat with them and be like, look, we're both new to this. Let's both
Mhm.
work together
Yeah.
and try and get something cool, you know? And so building relationships and building trust because you're being genuine about where you're at and what your skill level is like the best way to, first of all, grow a brand, but gain experience because you're not trying to be something you're not. And you're also focusing on being good at it as well. So I think, yeah, that together is like sort of like something that maybe, I don't know if it's missing. Like I think there's really good coaches out there, but I think there's also just a lot of coaches that aren't necessarily fully honest about where they're at. Not because they can't get results, just because they're if you're not honest with yourself, then you actually can't improve. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
So it doesn't matter if you've already had great results, you know, you can always get better. And so I think that's really key is if you're a prep coach in general, you should be trying to constantly improve so that and working with people that can allow you to do that. Because that's the name of the game.
Love that. And so the last question, your top piece of advice for clients, or no, sorry, athletes,
Hot piece of advice for athletes.
athletes. Yeah, listening to this podcast right now.
Yeah, okay. I think a lot of people I actually posted this on my Instagram just before is like a lot of athletes make this mistake of if I go with this coach, then I'll turn pro. And that can be true. Like there's definitely some really, really good coaches out there, right? Like
Mhm.
they have good track records. They're very good at their job. And so that I'm not going to say that just because someone turns pro doesn't mean they've clearly got the skills. But if that's your mindset going into it, then you're not actually focusing on what is actually required for that coach who can get people to turn pro to actually help you turn pro. And that's you understanding that you need to become a professional in your pursuit of progression. So if you don't take that responsibility on yourself to accept that this coach has the skill set only if you allow them to coach you to do it,
Mhm.
that's really, really important. So it's like it's like anything. If you're learning something the first time, you're completely unaware of what's required. But once you start building that skill set, a lot of the responsibility lands on you. You've got to do the posing. You've got to show up and do the cardio. You've got to keep your
Mhm.
life in order. You've got to keep your mindset and your mental health on track. The coach can only analyze and adapt things to make things as optimal as possible. They can't turn you into a pro. So you've got to be actively um, working on yourself in every way
Mhm.
so that you're ready for whatever comes your way. Like whatever the coach wants you to do, you're ready for it. You're not sort of like halfway through something and then you questioning whether it's worth doing. You know what I mean? So taking that responsibility and being coachable, but also becoming professional mentally and with the rest of your life so that
Mhm.
being a professional athlete is just part of the process then, you know?
I couldn't agree more. You
Yeah.
say you articulated that really well.
Yeah.
I was
I
like,
think
yeah, just gotta agree. Just sit. All I'm just doing today is just sitting here and agreeing, not doing much.
well, I think it's very easy to fall victim. Like I'm not blaming
Mm.
anyone because, I've done it as well. Like I've been
Mhm.
coached by all kinds of coaches. Like I've had consults with the top coaches in the world, like these guys that are big on Instagram, and I've got programs from them all. And something you learn when you've been coached by a lot of people and you've been a bodybuilder for a long time is there is no secrets. There is
That is
no secret.
something that is something I say all the time. I'm like,
Yeah.
when clients will jump coach to coach thinking there's some secret
Yeah.
formula, and I'm like, there
No,
isn't. There really
no,
isn't.
there's no secrets. And the other thing too is if you know that as a coach, right, there's no secrets and you have something negative to say about another coach, you're essentially like what you're doing is you're bad mouthing. Like if you have something negative to say about another coach and you know that there's no secrets to what you're doing, no, instead of it making you look better, it's making you look worse because what it's doing is like if you're talking to a girl who's in a relationship with a guy and you're bad mouthing the guy that she's dating with the girl, it's not making you look better.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So
yeah.
as an experienced coach, you should know that there's no secrets. And so what you need to focus on is forming the right relationships with your team.
Hmm.
Because if there's no secrets, what really matters is the relationship you have with your client. the ability to work together to achieve something great. It's not this suddenly like this secret protocol that works to make people pro. It's like it's the relationship and the potential of the athlete. So yeah, I think that's another thing is like there's no secrets, but you also have to be willing to be a professional so that you can be coached to be one.
Love that. Have the mind of a professional. Got to manifest.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
What would a pro do in this scenario? That's what you got to ask yourself.
Yeah, and it's never an easy like the answer's never like, oh, just sit down and relax. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's always the hardest way forwards. That's the crazy thing is if you're constantly seeking the easiest way forwards, that's not the attitude that you need. It's like you need to, if you come across something that you need to overcome, usually the hardest way around that's the best way to go.
Mm-hmm. Got to get uncomfortable, as he said.
Yeah, rather than the easiest way. It's like if it's easy to get through, it's probably not the right way to do it.
Love that. Sweet, man. So where can the listeners find you?
Oh, just on Instagram, Tim underscore one percenters. So one PCNTRS.
Yeah.
That's pretty much where I hang out all the time.
Perfect. So make sure if you do have any questions, feel free to send Tim a message. Once again, thank you so much for joining me on this second podcast. And I can't wait to do another one in the near future, maybe after post comp. But thank you,
Yeah,
Tim.
yeah, definitely. We spoke last time. We were talking about doing it more, and we just never did.
Yes. Oh no, this is gonna happen. We're gonna discuss it after this podcast. I don't want to spoil it yet.
Yeah,
But something's coming in the works. So
sounds
Tim,
good.
thank you again. Guys, if you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your friends and family. Once again, if you have any questions for Tim, I'm sure he's happy to answer them on Instagram. So I'll make sure to tag him for you guys so you can go find him. But this is Jeremy So, self-proclaimed gym bro, signing out. Thank you. Cheers.